What is going on, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Average Fan Podcast. We are back, just like Hartford Athletic. My name is Sam Ladoff, and I am joined by the lovely Oliver Scholes. Ollie Scholes, how are you doing, pal? How does it feel that now the best journalist has an equally well-performing team to cover?
Look, if you're gonna have to play midweek games, score 4 goals in them. That's really all the bottom line, right? Like if you're gonna have to play on a Wednesday night, you might as well go out there and score 4 goals. Maybe don't concede two, but definitely score four.
Especially coming off a nil-nil draw or 1-1 draw, excuse me. But they've had nil-nil draws, so you know, uh, muscle memory. But I think at some point, even if you score one goal, we start like kind of messing. Make it like a 2-pointer, a 3-pointer. I think we just really just go full like 1990, late 1990s MLS and just really have fun with it. But yes, we will talk about the Indy 11 match that was a match. And then we will talk about the lovely win in the USL Cup. But we'll start there with Indy 11. Obviously, kind of a disappointing performance, but I think considering the kind of health and, all the injuries going around, getting a point on the road is always, a good thing. So just what were your thoughts on that match? And also shout out to former New England Revolution striker Edward Kizza, getting a goal for Indy 11.
Yeah, we don't have to shout him out ever again.
That was it. That was the one.
That was it. Yeah. So I think this game on Sunday was really interesting because when you take results in isolation, it's always hard to know what they mean. And we're always trying to tell a story, right? And it's kind of it's so over, we're so back meme. And when Indy scored, when Kizza scored in like the third minute or whatever it was, like the Hartford Athletic fan confidence meter
Back
was
me
like,
wolf all the way here.
it was like all the way over, right? It was like, it's so over. It's never been more over, right? And then they come back and they tie that game and it comes back a little bit. And then because they then went ahead and won midweek, you start to tell a different story about what maybe that game meant, what the significance of that game was. And if they were to, let's say, win on Saturday against Miami, then it starts to take on a whole new complexion. So there are two ways you could maybe read this game. And I don't know that we really know which one is going to be the truth, quote unquote, yet. The first is to say it was another kind of blunt performance. Your only goal came from a center back, recycled off a set piece. Couldn't force the ball in the back of that. Otherwise, gave up kind of a soft goal in attack. That's the story of this team. It just wasn't just another indication that this season is kind of on life support. The other way you could read it is to say, given the totality of the injuries surrounding Hartford Athletic, all the guys who have been missing time, that they played that game heavily rotated in anticipation of playing on Wednesday, that you had, Sebastian Anderson and Emmanuel Samadia and Sadat Anaku and Adiwala Ubalola, all unlimited minutes. You were missing Arturo Dispe because of the yellow card suspension. You were missing Beverly Bakangila because of an injury. You were missing Mishin Galina. You're still missing Samuel Cariaga, Matt Real, right? Like, take that totality of circumstances and say, well, they did some good things. And maybe there's some signs of life there. So to build on that, I think one thing that really stood out to me was that you looked at the team that started that game with guys like, Galen Flynn out there, who is formerly had not really played above League Two, was originally on a 25-day contract and has, been retained through the season. You didn't have either of your theoretical starting wingbacks on the pitch. You were missing, this laundry list of guys. And after they conceded, they dominated the rest of that half. That, Sadat Anaku should have scored right before halftime. He couldn't quite keep the ball down enough to get it under Eric Dick's arm really late in stoppage time. But they were on the front foot. That this ragtag group that didn't in no way resemble what Brendan Burt wants to put out there as a starting 11 not just hung with championship opposition, but probably should have been level and maybe even ahead at halftime. And then in the second half, you had a raft of substitutions, and they were absolutely on top with a totally different set of players. And they equalized and maybe feel like they should have got a second goal there, too. So what you could say is if you want to tell a story that's really positive about that performance with Hartford is there were two totally different iterations of this team on the pitch, and both of them got on top of Indy, who are another team in that mid-table playoff race situation. So that's really, really encouraging. Of course, the other story you could tell is they still couldn't really force the ball in the back of the net, and that's been the biggest problem all season. And if that continues, they're going to continue to struggle. So we'll want to see a little bit more on Saturday, and then when they return from a break, which direction are they going in? But I do certainly think that game on Sunday feels a whole lot different in light of the Wednesday night result, and that's always the nature with any sports, but particularly I think with soccer, is that we're trying to tell a story, we're trying to create a narrative, and that doesn't solidify until the next game happens, and the next game, and the next game, and the pieces start to fall into place.
Yeah, and I guess just kind of too talking about the guys coming back to health, obviously kind of like Anderson, Samadia, and even Augie Williams, considering his role on this team, definitely are kind of big additions, if you will, to the starting 11, especially considering uh their overall kind of being out with injury and just what it means, particularly for Augie Williams, just kind of with some of the striker depth up top. Obviously, about Wednesday's performance, but when you look at guys like Williams, Samadia, and Anderson, just what did you see from them in those kind of, first minutes or just continuing to build fitness minutes in the game against Indy?
Well, I think with Anderson and Samadia, it was obvious when they came onto the pitch on Sunday against Indy, and then even more so when they started against Charlotte on Wednesday, that they just totally changed the game for Hartford. And you have these two guys who, in my estimation, were both deserving of all league consideration last season. I really honestly think either or both of them should have been first team all league selections at wing back or full back, however the league, wants to draw up that graphic, for all league. Um, and so it turns out that when you don't have those guys, your team doesn't look as good as it does when they're on the pitch. But what I think we saw almost instantly on Sunday was that it means Hartford can go down either side of the pitch without really having to think about it. There's no sense that, oh, we're better on the right or we're better on the left or we have to worry about whether or not we can track back appropriately on one side or the other because both those guys will run up and down the pitch all day long when they're healthy. And even if they're out of position, they will steam right back into it. So I think when they came onto the pitch on Sunday, they were absolutely running Indy ragged. Indy could not hang with them. Obviously, when you bring two all league caliber players off the bench, it's going to transform the game, right? The Indy starters were a little gassed. Indy doesn't really have the depth, and certainly I don't think any team in the league has the depth to say, well, we'll just put on a all league caliber player of our own as a reserve off the bench. Like we'll just match you, right? That's not going to happen. But I think what we saw almost instantaneously on Sunday was that they transformed the game because they give Hartford options that they don't otherwise have. And so I do think of all the injuries that Hartford have struggled through this season, Samadia and Anderson are probably the two most significant absences. Just in terms of the distance between those players and their backups, and just how much they bring to the team when they're on the pitch. Augie Williams, I thought, Sunday was probably a performance that continued to frustrate. He was a little better on Wednesday. I'm still not sold. I think Sadat Anaku could very well be on the verge of playing him out of a starting job, particularly if the team is committed to giving minutes to Abdullah Tawfiq as well. But it's important to have these guys available. They're going to have a really brutal stretch where they're going to have to play, I think, 6 times in 20 days or 21 days, something like that. And so all these guys are going to have to play and have to contribute. Augie Williams is going to have to be in the mix. alongside Adola Taufik, alongside Nishin Galina, alongside Adibawio Balola, Sadat Anaku. They're all going to have to contribute. So I think Anderson and Samadia reminded me why, and should remind everybody why the club just extended both of those guys through 2028, right? Um, Augie Williams, I think he still continues to frustrate a little bit. But you want to see him healthy, you want to see him available, and if he can give you a goal every 4 or 5 games, it's not great, but it's important. It's important.
Yeah, and you mentioned kind of the striker position there, and you mentioned Taufik. I feel like we'll probably talk about Sadat Anaku a lot talking about Wednesday. So let's kind of focus in on Taufik. Just what have you kind of seen from him in his kind of continued development? Obviously, getting more minutes. Just what have you seen from him? Particularly in this matchup against Indy.
Yeah, well, he's still at a bit of a stage of his development where he's relying really, really heavily on his physical traits, right? His size, in particular. Uh, in advance of that Indy game, and then again ahead of the Charlotte game, Brendan Burke talked a little bit about how at this point in his development, he really needs better service. And that's not his ceiling. I want to talk about that in a moment, but he still needs a little bit better service because he's not yet at a point where he has quite developed all of those technical skills to play in tight spaces and things like that, where he'll be able to manage it a little bit more himself. He still needs a higher quality of service. What I will say, watching him a little bit, it was true on Sunday, but on the opportunities where I've had to see him in training during the week, he is really improving in that aspect of his game, which is what can he do with the ball at his feet. His debut earlier this season, after he arrived, he could not get the ball out from under his feet when he received it. He just didn't. He couldn't quite figure it out. The game was a much faster pace than I think anything he was used to in the youth setup he was in Nigeria. And it just wasn't working out for him. If he couldn't kind of first time something or put his head on the ball, he just couldn't quite get his feet sorted out. What I've observed in training is that he really is developing that ability to play in tight spaces. He is much more comfortable with the ball at his feet. He can make those short passes. He's developing a little bit of a sense of how to beat a defender with the ball at his feet, to misdirect, to dribble past someone, those things, which are really, really important skills to develop if you want to be able to really compete at this level and potentially go on to a higher level. So that's an important thing that he will need to continue to develop over the course of the season and into 2027. Right now, it's not quite there for him, but he is a player who seems to be adapting very quickly, and that's not to say it won't be there in a month or 2 months, that we won't get to that Cup quarterfinal in 4 weeks' time, or to the playoffs if Hartford get there, and he has taken another step in that aspect of his game. But it really does feel like it's starting to click for him. It's starting to get there, and it really might just be a matter of how quickly he can really take that.
Yeah, and feel like center backs, might not typically get a lot of love. Depth most of the times if they're showing up on the score sheet, it's usually in the form of a yellow or red card, rather than a goal. So with Scarlett getting a goal, just talk to me about his importance to the squad, particularly considering the amount of injuries they've dealt with. Just how vital has he been to the back line?
Well, he's the captain, right? And that's a role that I think Brendan Burke doesn't hand out lightly. It's an important role because when the whistle blows and the game starts, um, the person who probably has the most influence over the emotion of the team and the vibe of the team and the mentality of the team is not the manager anymore. He's on the sidelines and he can shout and scream all he wants, but there's a limited ability to impact what's happening. It's the captain who has to be the one to um, calm people down, to lift people up, to help them shake off a mistake, to do all of those things that are happening between the lines during the course of the game. And Jordan Scarlett is, I think, without question, the leader of this team. That from that sense, uh, and it's so important for him to be out there because he is part of that glue that holds everything together. Uh, yeah, he can get a goal occasionally. We've seen him do it. He can get up in the box. He's always willing to give what the team needs, whatever it takes. But I think more than anything, his importance in this team is he's a real leader. He leads by example. You know, Burke talked about in the off season that, you know, he would go into the building during, you know, those off months in November, in December, and Jordan Scarlett would be there. He'd be working out. Or he'd be getting ready to leave and Jordan Scarlett would be doing, you know, his rest and recovery. He'd be giving every single bit of himself every day, not just during the course of the season, but to keep himself ready in the off season. You know, you always hear stories about players who report to training camp out of shape or they need to play their way into fitness, and that's not Jordan Scarlett, right? I guarantee you that if Harvard had to play a competitive fixture on like February 1st, he would have been ready. He would have been physically ready for that because that's the way he carries himself, and so he leads by example off the pitch and on the pitch. And so it's so important. And it's great to see him score. It's great to see him succeed. But he is the leader of this team in a really, really meaningful and important way. And I don't know how much of his career is left given his age, but it is great to see that he is still able to have that success because he absolutely deserves it based on the work that he puts in every single day.
Yes, definitely, definitely. So it was nice to see him get on the score sheet there. But now, from a 1-1 draw to a lovely 4-2 win for Hartford Athletic over Charlotte. You look at the starting 11, obviously a much more representative starting 11, if you will, in terms of the faces that you saw out there. I feel like we'd be doing it injustice if we didn't just say Sadat Anaku.
Yeah, right?
Able to score goals. Kind of crazy.
Yeah. So he has been a guy who really has not quite put it together yet this season, or had not quite put it together this season in advance of Wednesday's game. He'd obviously had an injury recently, which was really unfortunate. I think that injury came. He scored a goal. I think it might have been against Detroit, and then he like almost immediately after that had an injury and like couldn't kick on from that goal. And so it's great to see him back, and it's great to see him back on the score sheet. And he took two really good goals in that game. He the first goal he was exactly where he had to be. Right, it was a really lovely chip ball from Michael Adedekun that Augie Williams did an excellent job to get back across the face of goal. But somebody has got to take responsibility to crash in and try and be there on the chance that that ball comes back across the face of goal. So it was just a really intelligent play, I thought, from Anaku to know that that's where he's got to be and to be there and then, you know, smash the ball into the net. The second one was, you know, charitably to Indy 11's defense, it was a mistake. Um, Uncharitably, it was one of the most catastrophic defensive errors I've seen in quite a while. Um, and you know, when you get the ball and like you're like right at the top of the box, and it's the only person between you and the back of the net is the goalie, you've got to finish that, right? And he finished it very, very well. And that's something that I think the question had maybe been there a little bit about him this season is did he have that quality 1v1 with the keeper? He couldn't quite get it right against Eric Dick on Sunday, but he got it absolutely right against Matt Levy on Wednesday in that situation. And I thought overall he was really lively. He played with real intensity. He was right where this team needed him to be. And I wasn't, you know, being flippant when I said he might be playing Augie Williams out of a job because Brendan Burke said in advance of that Charlotte game, if you score, we have no argument to take you off the pitch. And he's making that case for himself as a scorer with those two goals. Now, he did come off after 38 minutes, so I'm not 100% sure if that was just about managing minutes. You're up 2-0, he scored twice, he's not cleared for 90, let's not take any chances, or if there was maybe something bothering him, a minor injury. So, you know, we'll see what that looks like. I hope that there isn't anything more health-wise with him. But I thought, just a really composed performance and doing exactly what he was brought here to do.
Oliver, I mean, based on Brennan saying that if you score, we don't necessarily have a reason to take you off the pitch. I think we just get Sadat Anaku, Augie Williams, and because we all love Taufik, we get Taufik out there. Just three strikers, baby. That will get the goal scoring going, and that will solve all of Hartford's problems.
Yeah, well, I mean, Adiwali Obalola got a goal in that game. Augie Williams got a goal and an assist in that game, obviously. And so I think all three of those guys heard that message, right? The message from Brendan Burke that was like, hey, who's going to take responsibility for this? Who's going to make the case to continue to get these minutes? And all three of them did. And that was really, really good to see. I thought Adiwali Obalola played with a lot of energy. That was a really good showing from him. He maybe should have had a brace. There was a moment later on where Michael Adetekun put the ball right across the face of the goal, and Obalola probably had to do a little bit of work to manage to fire that over the top instead of put it in the back of the net. Um, but overall, I thought another good performance from him. And Augie Williams, for all the criticisms he's had, a goal and an assist. I don't know what more you really really want from a striker at that point in a game. Like if he does that, it's hard to criticize him. So they all really answered the call on Wednesday, and we can say the level of the opposition is not the same as it is in the championship. Obviously, Charlotte are a really, really excellent League One team. They've, you know, taken Charleston to the limit twice this season. Actually, they actually do have two wins over Charleston. One a win in extra time in the U.S. Open Cup, and one a penalty shootout win in the USL Cup. And they win over Pittsburgh as well in the USL Cup. And so, like, they've gone toe to toe with championship opposition, but at the same time, like Hartford really put it to them, and those guys all showed up. I also really want to say, like, Michael Adetekun really feels like he's finding a role in this team. It's hard. It was hard watching his performance on Wednesday to remember that he's been here for like 2 weeks, not even 3 weeks yet. Um, he he obviously had the hockey assist for Augie Williams to set up Anaku for that opening goal. He had an assist of his own on the free kick that Augie Williams put home, and he actually had a hockey assist on Adiwali Obalola's goal when he played a little bit of a 1-2 with Emmanuel Samadia and got played a really really neat little ball in a tight space with defenders closing on him to allow Samadia to kind of round the corner on the left side of the attack and put it across the face of goal for Obalola. Like that was a really, really good performance for Adetekun in a team with guys that he has been playing with for like 18 days or something like that. So if he can continue to kick on, he's going to make it really hard to take him off the pitch when Samuel Cariaga is healthy, when Barry Coffey is not serving a suspension. Like it's going to give Brendan Burke some real selection issues potentially if he can continue to perform like that. But I really was impressed with how he played last night. That was really really good.
Yeah, I mean, kind of going back to Anaku, you kind of touched upon it, but considering it is USL League One opposition, do you feel like maybe this was just, him, playing well in front of, quote unquote, lesser opposition? Or do you feel like maybe the underlying traits, just what you're seeing him do kind of outweighs that? And, if he continues to do that in these USL championship games, that we could really start to see him fighting for.
Yeah, I think he he has an attribute that is hard to deny, which is he is incredibly fast. Brendan Burke has said he's easily the fastest player on the team when he's fully healthy. That he has a class of speed that is above what anybody else has, and that is something that can serve you well at any level of the game. If you can just be the fastest guy out there, it's going to create opportunities. It doesn't always speak well for your longevity, right? When you start to lose a step, if what your calling card is your speed, and you lose a step, then you could be in real trouble. But at his age, that's not really something he has to worry about. So if he can be fully healthy for the remainder of the season or next season, and he can play uh, play at the speed that he's capable of, it isn't going to matter whether it's League One or the Championship. That alone is going to help him create opportunities. What I do think he needs to do a little bit is just be a little bit more composed in his finishing. And I thought we saw a difference on Wednesday versus what we saw for him on Sunday against Indy. And what I would hope, and what I think any fan would hope for, is that the composed finishing and the timing that he had on Wednesday will be where he goes, and it won't be what we saw on Sunday where he couldn't quite get the ball out from under his feet in the right way to slot it past Eric Dick when he really had a golden opportunity. So I think his speed will take him a long way in this league. But he does maybe need to just get his uh, make his finishing a little bit neater to really turn himself into a 10, 12 goal type of player.
Yes, and we talked about it in the build up to the match. But obviously, this match featured VAR light, diet VAR, football video support, and there was, I believe, 3 instances, and all of them, the officials stuck with their call. Shocking news. But overall, just what was your thought on kind of the implementation? How the coaches kind of utilize it or didn't utilize it. Do you think it has a place, maybe moving forward? Obviously, I think for this tournament it will, but in terms of the larger, bigger picture.
Yeah. So if you were watching the broadcast of this Hartford Charlotte quarterfinal, you could see in like, I don't know, it was like the 5th minute or something that Brendan Burke was like demanding to see the replay on the iPad that the team had on the sideline. Like he was so ready to pull, to make the little hand signal and to pull out the challenge card. And he didn't initially. He held back, right? He waited until deep in that second half. So the 3 challenges that we saw in this game were Brendan Burke made 2 challenges on plays where he thought a red card should have been issued. One was a challenge on Michael Adedekun, and the second was last man, denial of an obvious goal scoring opportunity, kind of pulled down, Augie Williams getting pulled down from behind. And the official, Katerina Koroleva, in both cases decided to stay with her original decision, which in one case was a yellow card, and in the second case was no foul, was nothing. And I will say they were both, for my money, pretty borderline. The challenge on Adedekun was not studs up. The defender, who I think was Koulibaly, didn't even go all the way through, didn't follow through all the way on his tackle. Dangerous from behind, reckless. Certainly something I've seen Reds given for in other games. But a very hard one to really change to a red card given the limitations of football video support. The second one, again, just very, very borderline. It was very light contact between the defender and Williams. I mean, there was a little bit, but not much. And the ball was pretty overhit. It was almost under the possession of the Charlotte goalkeeper before Williams hit the turf. So again, just one, given the real limitations and the fact that you can't get a ton of angles and see was there a real tug on the jersey or something like that, not hugely surprising to me that in either of those instances, Koroleva decided to stay with her. The third one was a challenge by Mike Jeffries from Charlotte of a handball in the box by TJ Prestis, which should have been given as a penalty. And again, I honestly don't think you could possibly have overturned it based on the video evidence. It was practically invisible. It appeared that his hand was in a very natural position at his side. He didn't move his arm to contact the ball or anything like that. Maybe with a better angle, you would have seen something that would have given you cause to overturn it. But I thought, an impossible one to make a different call about. So I think what we saw in that game were kind of the limitations of football video support, which is that you don't get very many good angles. This isn't VAR where there's 27 cameras or whatever it is, and you can get all of these angles of every play and see, was there a tug on the jersey, were the studs up, was the hand moved to contact the ball, that kind of thing. So on balance, I imagine Brendan Burke's probably not super happy. Um, I think going into that game, he was very excited to be able to challenge plays that he thought had been called incorrectly, and to get those called correctly in his view, and to have both of those denied probably didn't leave him super happy. I can't imagine that Ekaterina Corley was going to get a Christmas card from Brendan Burke this year. Um, but I would have been. I think it would have been very difficult to overturn either one of those. We did, however, in the Miami San Antonio game, see two challenges upheld, and in both cases, it was for a yellow card to be upgraded to a red card. Both teams saw a player sent off after a successful football video support challenge, and I will say in both cases, I thought it was very obvious that the red card was the correct decision. So I think we saw that it can correct really, really egregious decisions, but it is really not going to have any impact on borderline decisions. We heard a little bit about that from folks covering the Canadian Premier League, that there were some cases where officials seemed really, really reluctant to overturn their initial decision. And I strongly suspect that that's how it's going to be, is that if it's borderline, they're not going to second guess themselves. If it's really, truly obvious, that's when we'll see the overturn. The only other comment I want to make about football video support is that the goals are reviewed automatically. And that added a huge amount of time to the game. The very first review of a Hartford goal, that first Anaku goal, it took like 2.5 to 3 minutes to review that goal. And that was really excessive, in my opinion. And we ended up with, I think, 5 minutes of stoppage time in the first half that was really only broken up by the two goals. And then we ended up with 10 minutes of stoppage time in the second half. And there were four goals in the second half. So that can add a little bit of time. Um, but the reviews took too long, in my estimation. And I do think that one of the things that has to be ironed out, not just in the USL Championship, but at the higher level for FIFA, is it cannot be 2.5 minutes to review every goal, because leagues won't want to adopt the system if that's what it's going to look like. So I wasn't super happy with that, but it was the first time the system was being used. I don't believe any of these officials had prior experience with this other than the training they received. So I don't think there's anything to hold the officials responsible for there, but it is something that really has to be ironed out in the future.
I think what really needs to be ironed out is why the signal is not this. we I feel like there's a universal signal for any sort of video review that has been well adopted by players across the globe. But unless like Cristiano Ronaldo owns football video support, I have no reason why this is the signal.
Well, given the level of corruption at FIFA, would it surprise you if we found out later on that somehow Cristiano Ronaldo owned football video support and we were all paying lots of money to him for the right to use this?
Wow, in FIFA's pockets and can't win a World Cup. Not my go. Not my go. But to get back to the match, obviously Hartford was able to get this lead, allowed those two goals kind of late. Is it as simple as maybe Hartford taking its foot off the gas pedal? Is it, Charlotte just not wanting to leave absolutely, obliterated by Hartford? Just what do you think happened towards the end of the match?
Well, it was a little bit of an interesting game, right? Because Hartford gets that third goal in like the 52nd minute, and Brendan Burke makes all his changes. Right? Emmanuel Samadia off, Beverly Mekangila off, Sebastian Anderson off, right? Like these guys who are on limited minutes, let's get them out of there. We're up 3-0. We don't need to risk anything. We don't need to stretch any of these guys. And then they went on, they got a fourth goal and looked like just in cruise control. And Mike Jeffries made his changes too, right? He really unfortunate. Luis Alvarez got what looked like a pretty serious injury, just absolutely excruciating pain he appeared to be in. Really, really unfortunate for any player, but particularly given the season he's having. And that seemed to inspire Mike Jeffries to say, you know what, I'm taking off the other key guys. Like John Vaquero came off. He made like 4 changes all at once. And it really felt like he was throwing in the towel a little bit and being like, you know what, we're down 4-0. I don't want to risk any injuries. Let's all just get to the end of this game and everyone can go home healthy. Um, and then they got a goal that was a little fortunate. It took a wicked deflection off of Jordan Scarlett, went down as an own goal. Nothing really, honestly, I think you can criticize anybody on Hartford for in that game. it just happens, right? Sometimes the ball just deflects off you and into the back of the net. But it did give Charlotte a little bit more energy, and I don't think Hartford really responded. They just kind of lost a little bit of focus. Sure, right? You've taken off like so many of these key guys, right? And again, no shade. Like Babacar and Jai, TJ Prestis, Christos Hutchins, they've all been performing well when called on. But it was a little bit like we have taken our foot off the gas a little bit, to your point, and lost a little bit of focus on that last goal on the second Charlotte goal. Um, it might have been a hint of fortune, a little bit of a lucky kind of deflection. Uh, let Clay Dimmick have the ball, kind of in a dangerous position to cross. Um, but at the end of the day, I don't really think there's a ton to worry about there. Um, when the game mattered, Charlotte couldn't generate a meaningful opportunity. The first 70 minutes, they weren't even in the game. It was all Hartford. And I think that is really, really encouraging. And I think as these guys get healthier, we get through Saturday, they get a couple of weeks to really build up to be fully fit. We're not going to have to worry about uh, substitutions enforced by minutes limitations in the same way, or at least hopefully we're not worrying about that. And so guys like Samadi and Anderson will be seeing out the whole game. Beverly McIngill will be seeing out the whole game. We won't be worrying about whether or not Christos Paskalis is really a guy you want playing minutes or not. Although it does appear that he's kind of earned some trust from Brendan Burke, which is an interesting development. So I don't know. I wouldn't read too much into those two late goals. They did, it did almost turn into what Alex Ferguson used to call squeaky bum time there, right at the end. And especially if that penalty had been given and it had, ended up 4-3 or something like that, it would have been really like, edge of your seat type of stuff. But I'm not too worried about what transpired late in that game. I don't think it really signals anything that Hartford needs to worry about going forward, provided that the health continues to develop in the right way, and we're not having to have all of these substitutions that Brendan Burke would probably rather not be making.
Yeah, and we've really seen this club, as we talked about numerous times, really be invested in this tournament. And like I feel like recently we kind of maybe saw it shift kind of like off the field as well. I know Hartford hosted an event and apparently the first beer was on Brennan Burke. And then, for this upcoming matchup against the Colorado Springs Switchbacks, who Hartford will be playing in the next round, I think there's like $10 tickets. So it seems like now from Brendan Burke's point of view to just kind of an overall team point of view, there's that continued investment in this tournament in the cup. And I mean, overall, Oliver, just how do you feel expectations should be, heading into a match against Colorado Springs, and the potential to get to another final?
Well, if if Hartford's health trends in the right direction between now and September 8th or 9th, whichever day that game actually is, um, there's absolutely no reason Hartford shouldn't win that game at home. Colorado Springs are a great team right now. They are really playing very, very well. They are not. It's not going to be a walkover. Last year's semifinal, they got Greenville Triumph in the semifinal, right? League One team, and Hartford walked all over them, 3-1 win. That's not what this is going to be. Probably. We saw Hartford kick the shit out of some good championship teams last summer when they were clicking. Like they ran over people who were good teams. Like were teams that went to the playoffs, were teams that advanced in the playoffs. And so if between now and early September everybody's healthy and they're really clicking, this could be a game where Colorado Springs walks into a buzzsaw, the way that RAFC walked into a buzzsaw when they came to Trinity Health Stadium last summer, or New Mexico, or some of those other teams that came to Trinity Health Stadium and just got dog walked because Hartford were firing on all cylinders. So it's a challenging fixture. Like, don't get me wrong, and I think we're going to have to revisit this as we get closer to the game and see who's healthy and see how Hartford's actually playing. Colorado Springs are a really good team. They are, Alan McCann has them playing very, very well at the moment. Um, but I really do think that if Hartford is going in the right direction, again, like, is it so over or are we so back? If we're really so back, this could end up being, Hartford could really walk all over Colorado because this is just this team has that in them if they can get everybody on the pitch and if they can get it clicking between now and then. And, we saw Colorado Springs and Hartford both played League One opposition on Wednesday night. Hartford took the best team in League One and they put them in the trash can for 70 minutes. Colorado Springs needed penalties to beat Spokane. And Spokane is a good League One team as well. Like, don't get me wrong. But like, if you were just taking those two performances and saying, well, it's League One opposition, one team struggled with it a lot more than the other. And so I do think this is a matchup that Hartford will go into with a really high level of confidence. Again, assuming that the health is there, assuming that this team is developing and they want to. So yes, difficult game. I absolutely think it is a super winnable game for Hartford, assuming we don't have another injury crisis between now and September.
Yeah, I guess just maybe kind of use that point to just talk about the tournament as a whole. Just what have been your impressions of the tournament, obviously in its second iteration? Ditch the Jägermeister branding, which is awful. But considering the teams that we have kind of in these latter stages, just do you think it's a benefit for USL?
Well, so first of all, they're never going to have a better sponsor than Jägermeister, right? Like it's
Just go
impossible,
back to it.
right? Although it was very funny when Hartford won last year, and there were like 5 guys on the team who weren't 21 yet. That I found
Great.
that was very funny. Um, what I'll say is, you look at who's in the semifinals this year. It's San Antonio, who won. We're I think the first team in some time to do the Player Shield Champions double. A couple of years back, I think 2022 or 2023. Colorado Springs, who are the 2024 champions, and Louisville City, who are like the best team in the history of the league, right? They have 2 titles. They've been runner-up twice. They won 2 Player Shields in recent seasons. And then it's Hartford, who are the defending USL Cup champions. Like, that is as good a semifinal group of teams as you could possibly have summoned up. I don't know what better would look like, honestly. That's a totally different situation than it was last year, right? RAFC, who had obviously in their inaugural season had won the Eastern Conference, which was good, but it wasn't like they were royalty in the league. Sacramento, who have had success over their history and have MLS aspirations, but don't have the silverware really to show. And then Greenville Triumph, who had been a good League One team, but were a League One team. And Hartford, who up to that point, who had won jack shit, right? So last season, it was very much like no team that really mattered had cared about this tournament. This season, it's totally different. We saw, Tampa and Louisville go to penalties. We saw, we've seen San Antonio advance. We saw Colorado Springs advance. We've seen Hartford come right back at it. So I think this is huge for the league that the big teams, and I'm going to include Hartford in that, given that they've won this tournament now, are investing in it. And that we're going to see, and I think we'll probably see it even more next season. I think we'll see even more Pittsburgh, Charleston, Tampa, like those other teams, RAFC, that really hold themselves out as like we want to be top teams in this league. Will really prioritize this because I think it is gaining prestige. I think regardless of which of these 4 teams lifts the trophy in October, it's only going to add to that because they all will be telling a good story with that. If San Antonio or Louisville wins, they'll be the first team in league history to win the Player Shield, the USL Championship, and the USL Cup. Colorado Springs will obviously have that league win and the cup win. Hartford be winning back-to-back cup. There's great stories no matter who wins from this point. And I think that will just add to people's clubs' desire to win this cup.
Yeah, definitely. And I think kind of now we can look ahead to the Miami match going up against MLS legend Eloy Room, Carousel legend Eloy Room. Another team that's kind of right above Hartford in the standings. You got some decent goal scorers. You heard on Lacadia, but it seems like maybe the goal scoring's coming a little bit from everywhere, some multiple sources. I guess just in general, entering this match, what are your thoughts on the Miami FC?
Yeah, but the Miami FC are probably like one of the weirdest teams in the league. Um, their owner has gone back and forth between whether or not it seems like he wants to own a team, cares about their success. They had been heavily invested in the past, and then they went through a stretch where it seemed like he didn't care, and they were signing guys off the street, and they were the worst team in the league. And now they're back to trying a little harder and investing, and maybe trying to build a team that isn't comically bad week in and week out. Um, they have a kind of an interesting history with Hartford too. Hartford, I think, won the first two meetings against Miami back in 2021. And then there was a stretch where Miami won like five straight against Hartford and outscored them 11-0 over those games. And then Hartford won four straight, and then obviously they played a nil-nil draw earlier this season at uh, Pitbull Stadium at Florida International
Oh
University.
baby, yes,
I think
Mr.
is what it is,
Worldwide Stadium.
Mr. Worldwide. So they've had kind of an interesting history together. This season, Miami are competitive. They have two players who went to the World Cup with Curacao, Jurgen Locadia and Ilan Rum, which is I don't think there's another team in the league that has two players that went to the World Cup. So that's really exciting, and I think if they had more fans, that would be really awesome. But unfortunately, at this point, they don't. Um, which is a bummer because they used to. When they played in the NASL, they were had a ton of fans, and it really just fell apart for them. So it's really, really disappointing that there aren't more people watching them play. I think that would really inspire them to maybe prioritize success a little more. But I think the challenge for this team, honestly, is that it isn't all about Jurgen Locadia. He has 7 goals. Arnie Roca has also played, I think, pretty well. But honestly, Locadia is the guy where if he is having an off night, or if teams are able to close him out of the game, Miami find it really, really hard to make anything else work. And so I do think the big question for me about Miami on Saturday is, does Jurgen Locadia play? He played on Saturday against Las Vegas. He played Wednesday against San Antonio. I don't know if he has 3 games in 8 days in him at this point in his career. Maybe he does. Um, but I wonder if he is even on the pitch on Saturday, or if he is, if he even really is available for 90 minutes, if he's more on a minutes limitation of some kind. And if he can't play, what we've seen from Miami repeatedly is that they struggle to make their attack work without him as the focal point, whether or not he's the guy who actually puts the ball in the back of the net. Arnie Roca does not have the same success when Jurgen Locadia is not on the pitch, for example. So I do think for Miami, um, the biggest question they have to answer is whether or not Locadia can go. Um, and if he can't, they might find it really, really hard going, particularly if Hartford are feeling inspired by their performance midweek.
Yeah, and considering Hartford's going to be kind of going on this break, just how do you think the team will approach this? And I think also it would be great just to give people kind of a health update and injury report update. Specifically, still looking for stuff from guys like Matt Real, and Carriega. So just how healthy would you rate this team at the moment?
Well, about the healthiest they've been this season, pending some sense of Sadat Anaku and whether or not he aggravated something on Wednesday. The only player who is really like truly unavailable is Samuel Carriaga. I would not expect to see him anywhere uh, near the pitch on Saturday unless it's in street clothes watching the team from the stands. But when we resume play in 2 weeks, I would not be surprised if he was working up to some fitness and had some availability for some minutes. I think he's getting a little bit closer. But everybody else is really, really building up their minutes. Mishi and Galina got on the pitch on Wednesday. Short, relatively short a spell, but I would expect to see him building up. Matt Real should be available, maybe not on Saturday, but he's very, very close. And I think he is likely to play very soon. Certainly, if he doesn't play on Saturday, he will also be one of those guys who, in 2 weeks' time, I think would absolutely be in the mix. So, and then of course, we should be looking at minutes expansions for some of these other guys as well. Obalola, uh, Samadia, uh, Anderson, Makangila. How that how those minutes are managed from Wednesday into Saturday will be interesting because there will be some of those guys where you absolutely want to get them back out there again. They only played an hour, 50 minutes, something like that, and they're good to go, start, play 45, or come off the bench. There might be other guys where you want to be a little bit more careful, just given the nature of the injuries they've had and where they are in that recovery process. Um, I would expect to see a lineup that looks somewhat like what we saw on Sunday against Indy. I wouldn't be surprised to see Galen Flynn play, for example, just because of everything that's going on around this team. Barry Coffey is a guy who will absolutely play because he could not play on Wednesday because of the suspension. So he played Sunday, he'll play Saturday. There are a couple of other guys like Haji Pascalas, who might be Andres Hernandez. But overall, the health is really getting to a good place. And I do think Brendan Burke will want to manage this game very, very carefully because now you've got 2 weeks coming up where you could maybe just build up some fitness and then hit that next game with something really, really close to your best 11. But at the same time, there will be guys who need to get on the pitch to build up some of that fitness as well. It's not something they can only.
And you mentioned Beverly Macungila, and I forgot to mention him as a great host. Talking about the Charlotte Independence match because he reached his 100th appearance for the club, and I think you've kind of talked about just how kind of special that is considering the turnover there has been on the roster. Obviously, when you get new head coaches, a lot of new coaches like to bring their guys in. So that can lead to a lot of turnover, when you're having a lot of new head coaches. But just looking back at, Macangilla's impact and, being able to sustain kind of a role here in Hartford, just what is it that maybe stands out about him as a player and just overall, just how do you think he's performed this season?
I think he is very reliable. Um, his, I would say he maybe doesn't have a terribly high ceiling as a player, but he also has a very high floor. You sort of know what you're getting, and you're not worried that he's going to have an off night and be really, really bad. The thing you're most worried about with him honestly, is that when he gets a yellow card and then he forgets that he's got a yellow card and he gets a second one because 4 times in his career he's been sent off for 2 yellows, which is really close to like a league record. So that's something you maybe worry about. But other than that, he's very, very reliable. And Brendan Burke prioritizes players who I think have that um, ability to give him the same thing in every game. That he's not worried about, am I going to get the high ceiling or the low floor? Does he love high ceilings? Of course, everybody does. But I think if you really pushed him, having those players and having a core of those players who are reliable and who will deliver consistently at the level you expect from them is really, really important. And Beverly Macangila has been one of those guys for Brendan Burke in his time here. Uh, I honestly, his health, if his health holds up, I think he probably stays in Hartford a little while longer. I mean, he did sign an extension so that, a couple of years are locked in there. I fully expect him to leave Hartford as the all-time appearances leader for this club. And I would not be at all surprised if Brendan Burke kept him here as long as Brendan Burke is here in Hartford. He's a guy that he relies on. He's a guy he feels very comfortable with, who understands the system, who understands what Hartford wants to do under this manager. And I would fully expect him to be here through 150 appearances with Hartford, which would surpass Danny Herrera's record. I think 156 is the actual record. And if he stays healthy, he could be that first guy to hit 200 appearances for this club. Like he really is. He's a Brendan Burke guy, and Brendan Burke is very loyal. He's not sentimental. So if Macangilla starts to fall off and can't contribute at a championship level, it will go south very quickly. Um, but as long as he continues to have that high floor, and as long as he continues to deliver, to do what he's called on, he's going to be here. And I think that reliability is really important, particularly for a club uh, that is trying to build a core that is aspiring to do the kinds of things that Little City has done, where you bring back 8 starters every year, where you bring back 12 or 13 or 14 of your top 18 guys every year for several years. Beverly Macangilla is going to be part of that into next season and the following season, and I honestly think beyond if he can continue to play at this level.
Definitely. So congrats to Beverly. I think a great way to cap off this episode, but no one go anywhere because just want to thank all of the average fans out there for listening. I want to thank all of you for engaging on Instagram post of me just pointing out something that Oliver wrote in a story about. So thanks for reading that story too, I bet. But make sure to check us now out on Instagram. I actually so new on Instagram. I have to literally look it up right now to make sure that I give the right. There we go. The Average Fan Pod. I assume if you search the Average Fan Podcast, you'd find that. But the handle is the Average Fan Pod. If you want to follow us, there'll be plenty of new content. There's been one person who's followed just since I last checked. So love that. Love to see it. But check us out there because we'll post all our video content there. We'll also post some graphics that maybe Hartford fans will appreciate more than some general New England soccer fans. I am putting on my graphic designer hat and making final score graphics, so gotta support that. And just yeah, we want to continue to expand the brand, if you will. Um, I think we have to have a goal over to beat Raising Anchor and just make this the second like level of the podcast wars. We had the first podcast wars with Big Matt Andrican, Big Time Matty Yanks, basically saying that Jason was the only good part of the episode he was on. So I think we step it up a level. We surpass them on Instagram. So basically, if there are Hartford fans out there and you don't follow us on Instagram, first off, what are you doing? Second off, subscribe to the Blazing Musket. Third off, by proxy, you are a Rhode Island FC fan. So if you don't want to be a Rhode Island FC fan, follow us on Instagram. But make sure to listen to us wherever you listen to podcasts. Make sure to give us a nice 5-star review. I will even take a 4-star review, maybe a 6-star review, maybe a 7-star review. And everyone hates me. But really appreciate everyone who listens. And I'm just glad I get to give Oliver an outlet to talk about how smart he is when it comes to Hartford Athletic, because he's the world's best journalist. So really appreciate everyone for listening along the way. As you know, for some reason, I'm getting very sentimental in terms of noticing that it's August. The time is changing. Time is coming for us all over. So very depressing end to this episode. So make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube where we post some video content, long form video content as well. But Oliver, I will stop depressing our listeners. Give us the final word.
Yeah, I mean, you're telling a guy in his 40s about time coming for him. Like, what
I'm
could
28
possibly
and I'm having these thoughts.
what could possibly be more depressing for me? Um, so last week I talked a little bit about how this past Tuesday was primary elections here in Connecticut for those political parties that had a primary. And what I said at the time was, you know, we have an obligation to hold the people who represent us accountable. That's what representative democracy is at its core. Is we don't conduct the governance of our communities, whether it's our town or our state or our nation. We delegate that to other people that we choose to elect. But we have to hold them accountable. And I just wanted to highlight, because I think it's important to say, one area in Connecticut where the people did in fact choose to do that. So for those who are not paying attention, Doug McCrory, who is a long-term state representative and state senator here in Connecticut, had been representing the second Senate district here in Connecticut. Very powerful individual in terms of appropriations within the Connecticut state legislature. Is under investigation, has been under investigation for about a year for inappropriately directing those funds to individuals who are closely connected to him, including a woman who is alleged to be his girlfriend. And that investigation came out of the collapse of a Hartford nonprofit called Blue Hill Civic Association, which for decades had been a crucial component of all kinds of work in Hartford's North End, which is one of the communities in Hartford that has been the most devastated by kind of like general civic abandonment of the people. There is so little public investment of any kind in Hartford's North End, and Blue Hill Civic Association had been an important part of filling that gap. And they collapsed for reasons that were not initially connected to Doug McCrory. But an investigation of this determined that Doug McCrory has allegedly had been using this organization to funnel money to his associates, again, including this woman who is alleged to be in a relationship with Doug McCrory. And he lost his primary on Tuesday. He will no longer be representing the second Senate district in Connecticut. And I think it's such an important highlight for why this matters. We cannot prevent this kind of corruption. People who are confronted with the ability to channel millions of dollars to their friends or their relatives or their associates or themselves, some people will succumb to that temptation. It's not possible to prevent it entirely. But then we have a choice, right? We have a choice in the case of someone like Doug McCrory, who is alleged to have done these things, to say, we no longer want this person to represent us. And I don't live in that district, and so this is not my choice to make. But it is for me, so encouraging to see the people in that district say, we would rather have somebody else represent us. We do not want a person who would succumb to this temptation, who is alleged to have succumbed to this temptation to represent us. So I applaud the people of the second district and the primary electors who voted for somebody else. They voted for Mariam Khan, who will now, given the demographics of that seat and the party makeup of that seat, will almost certainly represent those people in the state Senate. I applaud those people for that choice and to hold Doug McCrory accountable and say, we no longer want you to speak for us. We no longer trust you to do these things on our behalf. Because we all have to do that. We are all, I think, called on as citizens, as voters, to do that. And I think it was really important to say the people did that and to hold up that story.